An old friend is back, exposing himself and exposing how out of touch he is when it comes to the Baltimore Ravens. We talk about him disrespecting Zay Flowers and praising Lamar Jackson, as well as Keaton Mitchell sharing encouraging updates. All that and more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I am here with you, your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here on this Tuesday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day as well. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, you can like and subscribe to the channel. In audio form, you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We're 5 days a week over here on Locked On Ravens, bringing you that daily Ravens coverage. And here with me today, it is former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and Super Bowl champion, Qadry Ismail. OTAs week 2 kicks off today. The Ravens will practice today, Thursday, and Friday as we continue to creep closer to the regular season. You were at the open practice last week at OTAs. You shared your observations here on the show last week. And look, hopefully these guys can build upon a very positive first week where there was a lot of great attendance, a lot of players stepping up, and the same message really from a lot of this team, which is, hey, we want to win a Super Bowl. We're going to do everything we can. And they showed that with really showing up in waves to practice.
I think the big thing you look at with off-season program and with all the OTAs, it's the chemistry that you develop with one another. During the season, you're kind of already just locked into play as far as your position. Clearly, the 53-man roster, 47-man, active game day roster is established. But the OTA is where you establish the relational aspect of the locker room. The, hey, man, you see me, I see you. I see how you work. You see how I work. You know what I am thinking mentally to process these plays. I know what you're thinking to process these plays for yourself. And together, it provides that ultimate, okay, we're bonding. So when you get into training camp, bruh, all hands on deck, let's go. And I think that's where that off-season programming can really work well for you.
And just for those that didn't hear, there were only four Ravens missing, that being Kyle Van Noy, Jake Hummel, Daniel Falele, who's dealing with some physical things, and John Harbaugh said he'd be back soon, and Chidobe Awuzie, who was sick. Emory Jones not practicing due to the shoulder or the labrum, so that was expected. And then obviously the injury to Darius Washington, he was not out there due to his torn Achilles. We're going to get into a lot of OTA talk and things we want to see coming up. But, Q, I want to spend this segment talking about some very, call them interesting, comments from Nick Wright, who obviously has had his gripes with the Ravens. The Ravens fan base has their gripes with him. Definitely do not see eye to eye, particularly on the topic of Lamar Jackson. And Nick Wright really was taken aback by the fact that on NFL.com, Q, the Ravens were rated as the number 2 most complete roster, complete team, just behind the Philadelphia Eagles. And, that was something that Nick Wright took exception to. And he said, quote, "This is outrageous. They have an awesome quarterback and albeit old, awesome running back. I don't know that they're awesome or even very good anywhere else." He then went on to say their kicker is gone. Their wide receiver room is in flux for the 10th straight year. And last year, despite Ravens culture, had the number 31 pass defense in the league. He says, "What about Baltimore screams complete? They scream super led by 2 super duper stars, not this super well-rounded complete team." And then he said that he'd be better off for the list that said they'd be the second most likely to win the Super Bowl because this is your Lamar breaks through rather than they're the second most complete team in the league. He then took it a step further and said that the Ravens wide receiver room is a massive weakness. And Chris Broussard, who obviously works with Nick over on First Things First, he was taken aback by that. And he was like, "Has Xavier Worthy proven that he's better than Zay Flowers?" And he said, "No, but Rashid Rice has." And I was like, wait, hold on a second. Like, there are 5 different things to break down here. Justin Tucker was not good for the Ravens last year. The Ravens have their deepest wide receiver room they might ever have in their history, albeit maybe a couple of years earlier on in the franchise, definitely in the Lamar Jackson era. Their pass defense was great the second half of last season and added Malaki Starks. They had additions by subtractions. This is ridiculous to me that, and again, the massive weakness part of the wide receiver room, that to me is the one that kind of gets me fired up the most, because I'm just like, what are we talking about here, Q? What are we talking about right now?
Yeah, I guess he is trying to create a buzz and headlines that point in his direction and point away from the other guys that take this north-south approach and there's nothing in the middle type of debate, and good for him. But Nick is wrong. Let's just look at it for what it is. You got Bateman, where he is a touchdown scoring machine. One of the top in the NFL. I believe he had double-digit TDs coming off of last year. He's back. He's healthy. You look at Zay Flowers, sure, had a little knee issue late down the stretch that kind of hampered him and wasn't able to be that 100% player that he was looking for to be as far as in the playoffs. However, still made the Pro Bowl, still put up numbers, and judging on what I saw in the OTA practice that was available to the media, my man looked fast and smooth and fluid. And from the reports, he didn't have any surgery, so the knee was able to heal on its own. I think he's going to be even better because of another year of experience under the Todd Monken system that is led by MVP caliber Lamar Jackson. Then you look at the next group of guys in Tylan Wallace and the way in which Tylan has been able to just continue to be that clutch, reliable receiver. I think the elephant in the room is whether or not D-Hop and Tez Walker can be two guys that can really be those missing pieces that will make this room extra special. Not special, extra special. Because I think with Tez, what we saw in the Giants game, the way in which he was sitting there and figuring out how to be a pro, figured it out, was on point to get that pass that was thrown to him, seam route in the back of the end zone, toe tap touchdown. And I see where that kind of helped his confidence grow. I saw how he looked in a small sample size, one practice that was open to the media. Looked great. He looked fast, looked smooth and fluid. We know D-Hop and what his resume is. We know what he did for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs last year. And I think he's going to grow upon that, even so with Lamar Jackson this year. So as a group, that group is a pretty special group. I like them. And to say otherwise, you really aren't looking at the totality of the game and you're kind of just nitpicking at things that really don't exist.
There are so many different things that make this team good. And for years, Q, we have talked about, the Ravens needing to revamp their wide receiver room, get stars in their wide receiver room, draft better in their wide receiver room. And so I would understand it if maybe Rashod Bateman wasn't healthy last season, or Zay had a sophomore slump last year. But that didn't happen. And on top of that, you add DeAndre Hopkins, who, again, might not be prime Texans DeAndre Hopkins anymore, but still can provide you a really good number 3 receiver. And we talked about that, you and I, last week, where, you said he reminds you of Odell when he came into Baltimore and kind of that contested catchability. And so Chris Broussard kind of was like, well, Chris Broussard said that he thinks the offense will be good. The offensive line will be good. Said that was top 10 last year. He said the defense was really good over the second half of last season. And the assumption there is that they're going to improve. And then Chris Broussard said, you know what? The answer for a second might be Detroit. And obviously they lost the key offensive lineman yesterday. That was a big loss for them. And so if you want to have a conversation about that, that's okay. Like Chris Broussard making those points, like, okay, that's fine. But then just like the way Nick Wright put it, it just being these Q to me were just out of touch comments. Like it would be different if Justin Tucker had a great year last year. He didn't. He did not have a good year last year. Their kicker's gone okay, great. Like Tucker was awesome for them on the field for so many years. Last year, he was not. It would be different if their wide receiver room was bad last year and they were losing guys. None of that happened. It would be something if their defense played the whole year terribly in the pass defense department. They did not. It just felt like Nick Wright was trying to, like you kind of said, pick out points to strengthen an argument that really isn't even there in the first place.
I think when you look at it defensively, that second half of the year when they benched Trenton Simpson, they got rid of Eddie Jackson, they relegated Marcus Williams to June 1st. I think that's where you saw Ardarius Washington and company, Kyle Hamilton and company, and Brandon Stevens, bless him, and company, all step up and play a brand of football that was really, truly amazing. I think we saw where Roquan Smith was no longer burdened by trying to make things right. He could just go out and play because of the guys that were in place and ready to go because of them being studied up and knowing the mental side of the game. I think even Zach Orr just got more and more comfortable as a defensive coordinator, period, end of discussion. So when you look at the bigger picture, the second half of the year, I mean, they were like top tier. That's something that I look at as a compliment to the Ravens defense that's only going to get better. They're only going to get better. And I'm going to be observing some more Raven practices as they're open up to the media. I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, we're going to see who's who, what's what. They got some young guys like the TJ Champas of the world that are itching to put their stamp on this defense just as Nate Wiggins did last year. Mike Green is going to be a force to reckon with. Believe that. So, yes, they're rush guys. When you look at them, there's some small question marks there as far as just the depth of it. But I think that they're going to have Mike Green address that depth real quickly. And this is going to be one of those games where you're going to be looking at the defense talking about, man, that defense looks like defense of yesteryear where they just hit you right in the mouth. So we need to pump the brakes again, Nick Wright, when you're trying to talk about this Ravens ball club. This Ravens ball club is very much a complete ball club. I'll give you the fact that maybe we don't know much about Tyler Loop, but I'll keep you in the loop and see how his actions are when we be watching these OTAs.
Yeah, Loop is one of the biggest storylines of OTAs for sure. And coming up, we'll be talking about some of those big storylines. We'll wrap up our conversation on these comments from Nick Wright, plus getting to Keaton Mitchell, giving an update on his status and how he feels. So stay tuned, a lot coming up on the show. First, this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always undermined, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn, it's your one-stop shop for everything when it comes to jobs, hiring. I've had LinkedIn help me out a ton, and I have friends who have used LinkedIn to hire for their companies, and they are so happy with what LinkedIn has done for them. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. And LinkedIn has a ton of features, from helping you write job descriptions and also getting your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. They have it all. Plus, you can add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. You can post your job for free on LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Qadry Ismail still breaking down Ravens football with you here on this Tuesday. And Q, I think the funniest thing from Nick Wright's comments is that he praised Lamar Jackson multiple times in his answer, when we obviously know that Nick Wright has had very pointed comments when it comes to Lamar, particularly in the postseason. He said, oh, they have an awesome quarterback. And, he'd rather have a list that says they're the second most likely to win the Super Bowl because it's the year Lamar breaks. Then I was like, okay, to beat down on the Ravens, I guess you got to prop somebody up because they're too good to say they're a terrible team, because that's objectively not true anyway. So I think for Lamar, usually Lamar gets strays in these types of situations. Lamar was free in this. Lamar just kind of was absolved of everything. There was no Lamar stuff in here. But again, when you talk about a complete team and a complete roster, and you kind of hit on it in the first part of the show, it's like it goes beyond the wide receiver room and, the tight ends and everything, but they have a lot of depth. they do have that star power, and it's not just about the stars. I mean, we've talked about it, and, I've talked about it on the show as well. It's like this roster Q honestly might be the most complete team they have had in the Lamar Jackson era. And I know you were a part of an incredible 2000 team that had one of the best defenses of all time. And you've seen, you've seen that. You've seen
the best
that.
defense, not one of the best.
The best. I'll put a little, I'll addendum, the best defense of all time there. But you look at that, Q, and it's just like, you know what it takes to win a Super Bowl. You've been there. You've done that. And for this Ravens team, you look at this roster, I don't want to compare teams, but man, this offense has so much firepower. The defense has dudes on it. And look, even if they're not the second best team, second most complete roster, they are very much so up there, at least in the top 5, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think in the looking at the way they're going to rotate in their D-line, that's going to be really the telltale sign. I know that the secondary, I don't want to go ahead and put the offseason curse on them. Oh, they got depth. Oh, and we just, lay down the platitudes on them, because we've seen where they've had this quote unquote depth, even as they looked at it last year, and you saw, guys just falling by the wayside and weren't really able to take it full advantage of the depth. I think this year, it's one of those scenarios where they have a strong, solid team of secondary guys that look like, if they stay healthy, it will be a good, strong, solid secondary to compete with anybody in their division. The Chases and the Higgins of the world, of course, are going to be challenging, but I think this team and that secondary can handle it. But the D-line, the rush, as well as up through the middle with the Matabikes of the world, that's where I'm really anxious to see how it is all going to unfold, because, again, they're the ones that are going to be setting the table for what could be amounting as that defense that is really just a historic or potentially historic defense.
Yeah, and I think that the Ravens we talk about that 2000s defense, the best of all time. That 2023 defense was unreal that they had. And then, you look at this defense as well, where you look at where do the Ravens have a hole on their roster? The offensive line guard spot, maybe a little bit in flux with Daniel Falele and Voorhees. How are those guys going to respond, and how are they going to play? Is Ben Cleveland going to factor into that conversation? Safety, are they going to replace Ardarius with somebody as a vet? We'll see. The kicker position, but outside of that, like maybe the second inside linebacker spot, that's an open competition with Trenton Simpson and et cetera. But really, Q, you look across the rest of the roster, I really don't see a whole lot of weaknesses on this team. And so that's what you need, because, Nick is right in his theory of, it takes more than just a couple stars to win a championship. The problem with his thought process is that the Ravens have more than a couple stars, and they have a whole lot of depth that can also make you pay in certain spots as well, and they can contribute in key spots.
I think the one thing we also have to look at, you're right. They got that, mix of youth and veteran savvy. You got, youth and the Mike Greens and the Malaki Starks, and to a lesser degree, even, Nate Wiggins. But he played an awful lot last year, played at a really high level, didn't really get thrown at or attacked much. And when he did, he withstood it. Again, like I said, that TJ Tampa, his narrative of being a complete player is going to be put on display. I think when you look at Chuck Pagano as that secondary coach, that's an advantage. And so I think overall defense with, Zach Orr with another year under his belt, it's going to be a scenario where the Nick Wrights of the world are going to be eating their words. I know, again, it's all speculative across the league, but just knowing the way the Ravens prepare, knowing the way this talent is put together and what we've seen before from the Roquans, from the Kyle Hamiltons, from the Marlon Humphreys of the world, those veterans of the Matabikes of the world, the KVNs, those veterans are in those key spots. It's interesting because you do see them at every level. D-line level, you got your Matabikes of the world, the KVNs. At the, it's that second level, you got Mr. Do-It-All himself, Roquan Smith. And then, of course, you got the jack of all trades at that third level in Kyle Hamilton. And so and Marlon Humphrey. And so you got leadership across the board. You got leadership in the coaching staff as well. So I think it makes for a good, strong mix, even though it is still in that OTA phase of the offseason.
Yeah, and that's what I really like about this roster too, is you're not leaning too heavy one way in youth or veterans. I think it is always good to have a mix of guys. You can always lean a certain way, 60-40 sometimes, 65-35. But, if you just have a bunch of 32-year-olds on that team that are trying to win one last Super Bowl, that might not go your way. If you also have a bunch of 24-year-olds, they might not be experienced enough to go and get the job done alongside your stars. And so Baltimore has had guys who obviously have been in moments. They have, been in playoff situations. And while, a lot of their stars have not experienced the Super Bowl before, they have still been in tough playoff atmospheres. And while a lot of those haven't gone their way at the end of the season in terms of where their goals are, that has forged them. And, the team has been very open about the fact that the Buffalo loss has lit a fuel under them. Now, hopefully we're done with lighting fires and they can actually go and win the thing this season. But, it's tough to do something like that. But as Adafe always said, the Ravens are tired of finishing in spots that they shouldn't be finishing based off of the years and the rosters that they have had. Now, one guy, Q, I think is going to be really important to that conversation is Keaton Mitchell. Talk about depth and guys that can step up in certain moments. Keaton obviously suffered a pretty gruesome injury a couple seasons ago. He worked his way back to be able to play last season, but didn't really contribute all that much. He returned some kickoffs, played some spot snaps here and there. And Ryan Mink put out an article on Ravens.com yesterday talking about how Keaton feels better now than he did even as a rookie. He said, quote, "I feel like I'm back better than I was when I first got here." Said it's going to be a movie for sure. You and I have talked about kind of how Keaton was handled last season, and Keaton kind of opened up on that a little bit, saying, quote, "They were just holding me back and telling me to chill. You go out there and do what you can do. But hopefully this year I can help the team out in different ways." So can you kind of, Q, dive into a little bit of going through that process, working your way back on the field from a significant injury like that, trusting yourself not only physically, but also mentally, and then building all that up in your head to hopefully have a bigger impact the next year after coming back from that injury?
I think it's commendable and really shows his mental toughness and resolve to get back to the player he feels he can be. I think the redshirt year, if you will, to use that term, where the Ravens saw that he was ahead of schedule, didn't necessarily rush him back, got him in some moments, put him back in special teams to kind of keep him involved, and then basically kind of just eased away from not having him overwork his leg. Because now you put him in to the offseason program. He's there. He's not rehabby. There's a difference between being rehabby and actually going out there and practicing, and you're working on your craft. Working on your craft is the technique of steps to the hole. Being able to sit there and articulate in your mind what they're saying on the board as the running back room, then actually getting the physical reps when you go out on the field and getting it from Lamar and the other quarterbacks. And that is where, you regain your confidence. I think that's something that, is going to serve him well. Is really going to benefit this Ravens ball club to have a home run threat, the likes of a Keaton Mitchell.
I don't know, Q, if you've seen that LeBron James, the "here go two more for y'all," when he's talking. I forget what it even was about, but you have to go with Derrick Henry, go up against him, and then the defenses say, "Okay, man, we maybe are making some headway with Derrick Henry. He might be a little tired. Let's see." And then the Ravens say, "Okay, here go two more for y'all." They got Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell, and they can throw those two at you as well. So again, this is what we're talking about. The Ravens have the star power, and they have a lot of it, but they also have those depth pieces that can also make you pay for making mistakes, as they are super talented as well. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll get into what to watch for during week 2 of OTAs, some players that, we'd like to maybe hear a little bit more about, some players we're excited to keep an eye on, and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Qadry Ismail still breaking it all down with you here on the show. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form. We do bring you 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. You gave us a lot of great insights from your time out at Owings Mills and seeing the Ravens perform during week 1 of OTAs. Now week 2 is here. The Ravens again practicing today, Thursday, and Friday. Out of the guys that you observed and you saw, who were some of the guys that you felt like made the biggest impact on you and kind of got you fired up a little bit when it comes to what they could do this season?
Yeah, so I think, again, I must say his name, and hopefully as I go back out they opened up the media or the practices to the media again this week. So I'm going to go back on out there and check them out. But what I saw from last week was TJ Champa. Just really appreciated just kind of how he was going about his business, had some press coverage, had some off coverage, just moved real fluidly. I was very impressed with that. Obviously, the offensive line still in flux, but hey, Roger Rosengard, another year under his belt, he looked really good and smooth. I think when you look at some of the names that we aren't household names yet, even for me to roll off my tongue, some of the young corners, they looked like, all right, cool. I can see how these guys, maybe their role is special teams, but so what? Last I checked, you need some guys to be ready to do what they need to do, special teams. So Malaki Starks, who I know is probably going to be like sitting there soaking up a lot from Kyle Hamilton. I'm sure Kyle's going to be like, listen, bro, I lived off of special teams even when I was, figuring out my role as a young player. So get ready. He looked really good, though, in his he actually ran with the ones. So it'll be interesting to see how he builds off of last week, this week, when I get a chance to view their practice. I think Tez Walker is another guy that I really thought from a speed aspect of things, the way in which he was running with confidence and catching the ball, snatching the ball out of the air. I thought that was really critical. So those are some of the guys in my mind that really stood out and was like, okay, so far so good. You're making a strong impression.
One of the most intriguing rookies in this class to me, Q, is LeJohntay Wester. And he is someone that I think can make a sneaky impact for this team. What did you see from him at OTAs? Because it feels like there is a shot that he might carve out a little bit of a role for himself in this offense.
Well, it's more punt return that it looked like to me. They were trying to figure out his abilities, and I know that the college punt return versus the pro punt return is, entirely two different animals when you got guys coming at you. But he looked comfortable. He didn't look like it was something that, he had to figure out. At the same time, he was making catches. So the catches that he was making, they had, I think one of the 3 that I saw was a contested catch and really had good eye-hand coordination with it, stayed with it. I think the others were good down the field type throws that he also made, which when it comes to speed, when it comes to, Todd Monken loves to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands real quick. I can see him also, being in the equation. Long ways to go. I don't want to, stir the pot up yet, but I like what LeJohntay Wester, say that 3 times fast there, brother. I like what he brought to the table, and it shows that he was doing a lot of film study and locking in for himself.
Yeah, again, I just think that you have, on all 3 days, you essentially for Baltimore, you could argue that they found a contributor. And that to me is really exciting when it comes to the vet versus young conversation, rookie conversation that we had a little bit earlier in the show. But there are also a lot of guys that potentially could step up year 2, year 3, year 4 as they look to, round out or continue on their rookie contracts in really good ways. Who are some guys who you'd maybe like to see a little more out of and like to hear a little more from, or maybe guys that you're going to maybe focus a little more attention on over the course of this next week or so?
Yeah, I think Mike Green, I'm just intrigued to see how he is. I think the coaching staff, they love him, speak highly of him. I just want to just kind of see more, nothing negative. Clearly, not that David Ojabo is the odd man out, but I want to see more so you don't become that odd man out. Like this is a case where you're looking at not having 6 guys on the roster. It might be just, practice squad and kind of see how you ride it out through the season. But Adafe, in the way he was saying he put on some weight, I'd be curious to see how that looks. I know, again, OTAs is really, kind of difficult as far as the physicality of it all. But the biggest guy is just Trenton Simpson. I know they're going to do a lot of 7-on-7 and the like. And in that, you're going to see, all right, got these stud tight ends. Can you cover them stud tight ends? It is to your advantage to get familiar and do your thing against guys that other teams really have difficulty covering. If you can cover Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, or Charlie Kolar, you're putting yourself in a good spot, in a good position to redeem yourself, if you will.
Yeah, and again, there's only so much you can take away from OTA's Q with the lack of contact and other things as well. Pad levels not being there, obviously, but it is a good way to, kick off off-season workouts and maybe for some of these younger guys, make a name for yourself. So really excited to see. And of course, Q, I'm excited to hear your insights as we continue along here over the next couple of weeks and couple of months as off-season programs continue. And that's all I have here today. Q, I appreciate you. Please tell everybody where they can find you and what you're working on as we continue going through the checklist, as we are checking off boxes, getting closer to Ravens regular season football being back.
Yeah, no more of the speculation. Let's just look at the real stuff. MissileTraining.com. MissileTraining.com is where you can find me, communicate with me, and let's talk about human movement and sports performance training. What that means if you're an individual, what that means if you're a team, what that means if you're a young person developing, what that means if you're a collegiate or a professional developing. Doesn't matter the sport. At the same time, if you're a person just looking to move free of pain, getting a chance and an opportunity to live a fullness for yourself, longevity-wise in life, doesn't matter if you're 6 all the way up to 85, my oldest client, MissileTraining.com. At the same time, you can also find me on television. WJZ is where the purple shows are at. We, myself, Alex Glaze and company, we're going to break it down for you every Sunday. Purple pregame show, going to have a little something different this year. I think you guys will really like that. So tune in, check that out. And of course, Locked on Ravens right here. Kevin Oestreicher and I, we just be chilling, talking shop, breaking it down to you, the faithful listener, telling y'all all you need to know as far as the Ravens, and Kevin, the master of speculation in the offseason, let him run with it. At the same time, once that end season starts to come, that's where the tag team action gets in hand, shares his thoughts and opinions. I share mine, and you guys either like them or don't. That's okay, but check us out regardless.
And you know what? I will take that master of speculation title and I will wear it proudly because that is who I am here. But you know what, Q? Don't sell yourself short. You can do it too. You hold your own when it comes to that. And I appreciate you for rocking out with me there. But of course, yes, Q will be with us every week. He provides great insights, and be sure you go check him out over at Missile Training. Links to all Q's work in the description down below. As always, Q, as always, I appreciate you. And thank you to everybody who watched and listened to today's episode of Locked On Ravens. On the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form and subscribe over there as well. It's the same show, both audio and video. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow for more Ravens content on Locked On Ravens.